And now, as you look back, you see the landscape behind you, marked with effort, with tears, with grace. The path wasn't straight, it wasn't easy, but it was yours. And because you walked it, someone else now believes they can walk theirs too. That's legacy. That's impact. You're no longer focused on how far you have to go. You're grateful for how far you've come. You stop measuring progress by what you've gained and start measuring it by what you've given. Your heart is fuller. Your mind is quieter. Your spirit is rooted. There's still work to do. There always will be. But now you work with love. You've stopped striving for perfection and started embracing excellence. Excellence doesn't mean flawless. It means faithful. You've become faithful to your calling, to your growth, to the quiet voice that told you to begin. There's beauty in how your pain turned into power, how your waiting turned into wisdom, how your discipline became your peace. And the best part? It wasn't luck. It wasn't magic. It was choice. Over and over, you chose to rise, to stay, to stretch. And yes, your potential cried for mercy. You pushed it to the edge. You demanded everything it had, and in return, it gave you everything you are. You've become someone who can be trusted with strength, with influence, with truth. And now when you speak, people lean in, not because you're louder, but because you're clear. There's a stillness in your voice that calms storms, a strength in your presence that doesn't need to shout. You've become a lighthouse, quiet, steady, unshakable. But even now, you don't stop. You're not addicted to motion, but you understand momentum. You've tasted what's possible when you refuse to quit. And now, you carry the responsibility of that knowing. You walk humbly, boldly, gratefully, because now you understand this life is not about being impressive. It's about being impactful. It's not about what you collect. It's about who you become. And you became someone who didn't let their potential die in silence. You took what was hidden and gave it breath. You took what was ordinary and gave it purpose. You lived fully. You gave deeply. You loved intentionally. And now, even when your voice is quiet, your life speaks. So now I ask you, what will you do with what still remains in you? You've come far. But is there more? Could it be that your best days are not behind you, but waiting in the next yes? The story isn't over. The mountain may be high, but so is the calling. And if you dare to keep climbing, even through pain, even through silence, then you'll know exactly what it means to strain your potential until it cries for mercy. There comes a moment in life when the silence becomes too loud to ignore. Not the silence of peace, but of something missing. You wake up, go through the motions, smile when expected, and check off tasks like you're alive, but deep inside, you know something is asleep. It's not sadness, not exactly. It's more like hunger. A hunger not for food nor comfort, but for something that once burned brightly and now only flickers. This moment is not traumatic. It doesn't come with fanfare, but it changes everything. It's the moment your soul whispers, there is more. And in that quiet urgency, you begin to remember. Not the calendar of your life, not the responsibilities or the regrets, but the version of yourself you once believed in. The child who dreamed loud, the adult who once made promises to rise above. You begin to see that your potential never left. It's been standing at the edge of your routine, waiting, not asking for perfection, only permission. Permission to be stretched, demanded, exhausted even, until it finally gets to breathe. What about you? Do you remember the last time you felt truly alive, not just functioning, but alive? That question alone can shake a person, because if you pause long enough to answer it, you may realize it's been far too long. And so, something inside you shifts, not everything at once, but enough to make you uncomfortable in the old places. The couch that once felt like safety starts to feel like chains. The routine begins to itch. You sense it now, the false peace of comfort zones. They cradle your body while numbing your spirit. And you're done with that dot. Thank you for staying with me this far. It means something. It means your spirit hasn't given up, and neither have you. And I promise you, the best part of this journey is still ahead. The road forward is not paved with motivation, but with decisions. Tiny, stubborn, faithful decisions. Waking up earlier even when you don't feel like it. Showing up when no one notices. Praying with tears when words fail you. Pushing your limits even when no one claps. These aren't acts of show. They are acts of war against the version of you that settled. And each time you choose the harder path, you remind your soul what it was made for. But this war is not fought with clenched fists. It's fought with open hands, with surrender, with trusting that the pain has purpose. That when you're sweating through progress, you're not losing strength, you're finding it. There's a grace that meets you in your hardest moments, but it only shows up when you dare to go further than you ever have. And going further hurts. Not in the way of injury, but in the way of birth. You stretch yourself. You confront your pride, your fears, your laziness. You call them by name and drag them out into the light. And something holy happens when you refuse to be the same. Heaven leans in, because the person who demands more of themselves becomes the kind of person God can use. That's when resistance appears. Not just external resistance, but the loud, convincing kind from within. The voice that says, "You're tired. You've done enough. You're not made for this." And you could believe it. But instead, you remember, you said you'd strain your potential until it cries for mercy. So you keep going. You start to feel it. Not glory, not victory, but real effort. And real effort is sacred. It humbles you. It stretches you. It teaches you that you're not here to coast. You're here to climb. And as you climb, something shifts. The pain doesn't go away, but it changes. It's no longer the pain of being stuck. It's the pain of stretching into someone new. There's a difference. One drains you, the other builds you. You start noticing your thoughts transforming. Complaints turn into commitments. Excuses turn into action. You no longer wait for motivation. You move with conviction, and the world begins to notice. Not all at once, and not loudly, but in small ways. A new posture, a sharper focus, a deeper presence. You're no longer just existing, you're becoming. And with every step, your old self crumbles behind you like dried leaves in the wind. It's not a loss, it's a necessary shedding. Because to rise, something must fall. Often, that something is who you used to be. This is where the journey tests your patience. You've done the work. You've endured, but the results seem invisible. And in that silence, you're tempted to stop, to say, maybe this is enough. But something stronger rises in you. A voice not of frustration, but of faith. It says, keep going. The seeds are working, even if you don't see them yet. And you do. You wake up again. You pray again. You give your best again. Not for applause, not even for outcome, but because you said you would. And that kind of consistency, it builds a foundation no storm can shake. It's in that discipline that true transformation begins. Because repetition, done with heart, is not routine, it's devotion. There comes a day when your effort feels pointless, when your soul aches and your mind whispers, why bother? That day is holy, because that's the day most people quit. But not you. You sit in the silence. You cry if you must. And then you stand, because you've learned that your feelings are not your master. Your mission is dot, and then a shift. Not in the world around you, but inside. You no longer fight to become someone you realize you already are. Not perfect, but planted, rooted, growing. You walk into the same places with a different spirit. You handle the same challenges with a new strength. You carry the same responsibilities with more joy. You haven't arrived, but you've awakened. The people around you may not understand. Some will cheer, some will question, but none of that matters, because you're not walking for them. You're walking with purpose, with clarity, with peace, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And your life, once quiet and passive, now speaks loudly without saying a word. It's not about being loud or impressive. It's about being anchored. And when storms come, and they will, you won't be shaken. Not because you're immune, but because you're prepared. You've trained for this. You've built your soul in silence. And now, even in chaos, you stand firm. And you begin to understand that all along, the goal was not a destination. It was strength, clarity, conviction, a soul sharpened by struggle and refined by effort, a heart surrendered and yet unrelenting. That's what was being built. Not success, but substance. Not comfort, but character. And that is something no one can take from you. And then comes the moment you didn't expect, not a celebration, but a calm. A deep, steady stillness that fills you from within. You're no longer chasing, you're carrying. Not trying to prove, but simply living what's true. You've become someone who doesn't need to announce growth, because it radiates quietly through everything you touch. That quiet strength begins to disturb old fears. They knock again, hoping you'll answer like you used to. But this time, you don't. You recognize their voice, but they no longer hold the key. You're no longer ruled by what used to stop you. You've gone too far to go back now. And then comes resistance again. Different this time, stronger, wiser, dressed up as logic. It tells you you've done enough, that maybe it's time to rest for good. But you remember your promise to strain your potential until it cries for mercy. And you smile, because you're not afraid of the strain anymore. You welcome it. You've made peace with the process. You realize that the mountain wasn't there to break you. It was there to reveal you. Every step, every stumble, every silent night you endured was sharpening something in you. And what it gave you is far more than you ever asked for. It gave you awareness, grit, vision, compassion, humility. And now you're climbing not just for you. You're climbing for those who will come after you. For those who are watching silently, wondering if it's possible. And in your struggle, they find courage. In your discipline, they find a blueprint. In your silence, they hear hope. This is when your effort becomes sacred. Not because it's seen, but because it's selfless. You're no longer just transforming, you're becoming a vessel. And through your journey, others will awaken. You become living proof that God still works through the ordinary, that excellence is still possible, that purpose is stronger than pain. And even when fatigue creeps in, you don't resent it. You honor it, because it means you gave something of yourself, and giving. That's what this life was always about. You're no longer asking, what do I get? You're asking, who do I bless? That's how you know you've grown. There will still be dark days. That never changes. But you are no longer afraid of the dark. You carry your own light now. A light lit by obedience, by persistence, by faith that walked even when vision failed. That light doesn't flicker anymore. It burns steady. It burns true. And when your body wants to quit, when the ache feels too deep, you remember, this was never about ease. It was about endurance. And you were never alone. Not once. There was always a hand on your shoulder, a voice in your chest, a whisper from heaven saying, keep going, I'm with you. And in that moment, you walk taller. Not because the burden is gone, but because now you carry it with meaning. The weight is still there, but so is the strength. The mission is still hard, but now it's holy. And suddenly, you realize you've changed, not in loud ways, but in the deepest places. You no longer ask the world for permission. You no longer wait to be rescued. You've become responsible for your growth, your peace, your purpose. And there's something beautiful about that quiet authority. You wake up differently now, not always eager, but always willing. You understand the difference between excitement and commitment. Excitement fades, but commitment, that's what builds legacies. That's what leaves fingerprints on eternity. And you are building, even when no one is watching. Then, one day, it happens. Not a miracle, but a moment. A simple glance in the mirror, and for the first time, you see someone you respect. Not for what they've accomplished, but for what they've overcome. For how they kept showing up, even when it was hard, even when it was lonely. Especially then. And you smile not with pride, but with peace. Because you know now, you've been walking with God all along. Even in the silence. Especially in the silence. He never promised it would be easy, but he did promise it would be worth it. And now, you believe him. You start to see the fruit not just in your life, but in the lives around you. People begin to ask you for advice. They lean in when you speak, not because you're loud, but because you're real. Your scars speak louder than your words. Your consistency has become your testimony. And then comes a strange feeling, not urgency, not ambition, but rest. You no longer strive to prove yourself. You simply walk in what's already been planted. The field still needs tending. But you now work with joy, not pressure. With purpose, not panic. You've discovered a rhythm. Not of the world, but of the Spirit. You understand now that some days are for battle and others for recovery. That rest is not weakness, it's wisdom. And you've learned that those who rest well rise stronger. And now, when challenges come, you don't panic. You pause. You breathe. You pray. You speak life. You move forward. And even when you fall, and you fall with grace. You fall forward. You fall into the arms of the one who's been carrying you the whole way. You've grown past fear. Not because fear no longer visits, but because it no longer gets to stay. You greet it like an old acquaintance and remind it that you're already spoken for, that your identity is not in outcomes, but in obedience, not in applause, but in alignment. And from that place of truth, you start building things that matter. Not for fame, not for status, but for service, for legacy, for the quiet satisfaction of knowing you didn't waste the breath you were given. You used it to rise. You used it to bless. You used it to grow.